Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Today we have an AMA with Jeff and Justin Wiguna, co-founders of Kuju Coffee. We'll be talking about REI to Sprouts, how Kuju brought camping pour over to coffee aisles nationwide. So a little bit about myself. My name is Aoki. I'll be your moderator today. I'm on the AHN business development team, working on projects like our marketplace that was just launched yesterday. Outside of AHN, I'm a product manager at Intuit, based out of London, where I lead globalization of new payment products. So today we'll have a brief intro of Jeff and Justin. We'll have the AMA. Justin will demo the product, and then we'll do a giveaway of Kuju Coffee. You must be present to win. And lastly, don't forget to ask questions in the Q&A box in Zoom or comment on the Facebook stream. Awesome. Now we'll see a quick brand video.
Do we wander so we can go far? Or so we can be close? What does it mean to wander? Does it mean to venture to faraway places? Or do we wander to find? Or be found? The greatest wandering we can do is beyond the epic adventures you can see and into the moments you never could. It's time to wander into those moments that matter. To go to our mountaintops, to cultivate our souls and rejuvenate our spirits. To Kuju. Kuju Coffee, for wherever you wander. Wander with us at kujucoffee.com.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that was awesome. Welcome, Jeff and Justin. So I'll give a brief intro. Start with Jeff here. So Jeff is a co-founder and CEO at Kuju Coffee. Prior to Kuju, Jeff was sales and marketing director at social enterprise Good Paper, where he led a turnaround from declining sales to national distribution at Whole Foods Market and financial profitability. He is driven by fierce competitive spirit and is passionate about building brands that can have scaled and relevant impact on the world. He's a graduate of University of California, Berkeley Haas School of Business, and has 2 young daughters and is an avid jazz pianist. So welcome, Jeff. Justin Wiguna here is the co-founder and COO of Kuju Coffee with a background in product design and technology. Justin is passionate about creating emotional impact through great products and process. Before Kuju Coffee, Justin was a product manager for Capital One Labs, a technology and design innovation lab where he closely studied behavior design, built products, and helped teams push products to market. Justin hails from Stanford University, where he studied engineering and entrepreneurship, and also discovered his passion for coffee. Awesome. Cool. So I actually had the pleasure of going to Stanford with Justin, and I remember him being really into coffee. So we'll kind of start it off with Jeff and Justin. Like, how did this interest in coffee turn into a business?
Jeff, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. I thought you were going to say something. Yeah, I mean, it starts with both Justin and I we grew up in scouting. So we're both Eagle Scouts, and our story is 2 Eagle Scout brothers who got tired of instant coffee while camping, but which is true. And the details are we were camping in Red Rock Canyon, Nevada, and everything around us was beautiful. And when you wake up in the morning and it's cold and you drink instant coffee, it's really kind of a noticeable thing, especially if you're in San Francisco, where there's just really good coffee everywhere around you. And then so what had happened is we had found some of these cool pour-over filters in Asia, actually. And Justin brought them on that trip, and he said, "Hey, Jeff, look what I brought." And he was very excited. And that was kind of the moment that I realized, there might be an opportunity for this, because 1, the coffee we have right now is not great. And 2, he was very delighted. And I just knew if he was that excited, there was an opportunity there for taking it to the outdoor channel and the outdoor market and the outdoor use occasion to start. And so fast forward that moment and a Kickstarter and a bunch of other stuff, you have Kuju Coffee today with our single serve pour over that we called the Pocket Pour Over. And I guess fast forward after that, we're here with you, KK. So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. Well, we'll start it off with, I'm curious as well as, how do you know when to leave the corporate job to focus on Kuju Coffee? And this is for both Jeff and Justin. Curious, a lot of our listeners, myself included, working a full-time job, want to do a side hustle, turn it into a broader business. When do you know when to leave?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Jeff and I, we were both working jobs when we started this. Actually, I was actually in school still. It was a senior spring. Senior spring at Stanford is pretty chill. But there's a lot of ideation, a lot of trying to figure out what do we even call the brand? How do we brand it? We actually thought we would bring it to hotels first until that camping trip when we realized this is a great outdoor piece. And then I started a corporate job. I actually worked for, like I said, like KK brought up, Capital One Labs. I was there for a year and a half, all the time working on Kuju, nights and weekends. And after a while, it just became incredibly clear that I couldn't do both. That if we ever wanted Kuju to grow beyond what it was, I had to quit my job. I had to go do Kuju full time and invest into it. That was, I don't remember exactly what year, but I remember I left my job in like March. And then a month or two later, we got this huge deal from Subaru, partnership where we actually had to essentially build out an entire factory and production line and fulfill like a $200,000 order within 2 months. And so it's like, I couldn't have left my job at a better time. I think it was definitely time. If I didn't do that, we wouldn't have been able to complete that order. So that was it for me. Honestly, there was also a little bit of I didn't really love my job that much at the time. It's kind of like coming to the tail end of how much I felt like I was learning. So it was a good push-pull factor. I was pretty much ready for the next thing, and Kuju was ready for more.
Yeah, for myself, the really blunt answer is I had essentially gotten fired, and I was so pissed off. And this was actually from that company, Goodtaker. So I had worked there for 2 years and took them national into Whole Foods, which was a huge deal, and I was very proud of myself, probably too proud, quite frankly. And negotiations with my boss at the time to move into essentially the CEO position at the company just didn't work. And I guess I was forced to resign, whatever you want to call it. And that was just so frustrating to me because I had been fired before. And I guess I say that with a little bit of a point of pride. It shows that I was really entrepreneurial. I just couldn't handle keeping a job, even though, I had been let go because I had done poorly in a job. In this case, I had been let go because I did so well, and I wanted more, for the company, and I had a big vision for it. And so that was a big lesson for me to realize that, you know what, and this is particular to me. I don't know if it applies to everybody, but I learned that, as an employee, if you do a bad job, you can get let go. If you do a good job, you can still get let go. And I said, you know what, screw it. I've had this idea for a while. I'm just going to do this. So I had a month where I was transitioning out, and basically every day at 6 o'clock, I would work on just one thing for the company. And I had like side things. I was like working the front desk of a gym, which was weird. And then I worked at another startup, which was good. But then I also worked on our Kickstarter on the side. So I didn't really have much of a choice. If anyone out there is wondering, I've definitely heard from experienced entrepreneurs, don't quit your day job until you really have to. The amount of stress associated with kind of a dwindling bank account while you're trying to make money on a business is not conducive to more success unless you just have really thick skin. But that's what it was for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Jeff, you brought up kind of a mindset really about running and operating your own business. Can you kind of go into that?
Yeah, the mindset, operating or starting it, those are two different things.
Yeah. I guess tell me the difference.
Sure. So operating it takes a lot of discipline. I mean, for one example, we just switched accounting partners, and I mean, it gets really nitty gritty. Our COGS are calculating differently. We need to find out why so that we can make investment decisions for 2021. That's like operating pretty dry, but really important. Starting it, I think the mentality, and again, I think every entrepreneur or anyone aspiring to be an entrepreneur has different perspectives on this. But it really is, I think, dependent on your strengths and weaknesses and how you kind of live into them. For me, and I say this completely honestly, it was just this attitude of like, this is going to work no matter what. And I mean that almost literally. This is going to work. I don't care what people are going to say. I don't care what people say. And if they think maybe the market's too small because we're tackling the camping channel, I remember a guy from JM Smokers had said that to me at a trade show. My mentality, if I will articulate it, is I don't care. We're going to make it work. You know, that's what innovation is. And it requires that in the beginning to, the key I have found, and Justin I think Justin might agree, endurance I think is very critical. A lot of people can innovate, a lot of people can create cool product, a lot of people can probably get it to distribution, get customers, but enduring through ups and downs for prolonged periods of time is what gives you the competitive edge, because some people just can't handle it. And it can be very, very much a grind, especially in the first 2 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think one question from our viewers is, did the two of you establish the same vision in the beginning of your business? I know you mentioned went on a camping trip, pulled out these awesome things. You know, how did that vision come together? Or were they different? What was that like?
Ooh. I'll take a crack at this one. Well, since the beginning, Jeff and I had kind of very much synced up on where we want the business to go. I remember in the early days, we were kind of talking about how much of the business do we want it to be online, how much of the business do we want it to be wholesale retail. That was back in 2015. And that's nowadays everyone's saying everything needs to be online because of COVID. But back then it wasn't as clear. And actually for our industry and CPG, the way to win at the time, it was to win on shelf, is if you get distribution, as if you're the coffee brand that gets the slot at REI, if you're the coffee brand that gets the slot at Whole Foods, then you're more likely to win. So we always synced up quite a bit, and I'm not gonna lie, it continued to evolve, and it continues to evolve. But I think one place that was actually hard for me, and in full transparency, is the fact it like came from being around Stanford. It came from being around tech startups. It came from technology, where the expectation in growth is venture growth. You raise a couple $1 million, that you expect 10x returns in 7 years, and then an exit in 7 years, and that's it. You kind of it's a cash making machine. I think the awakening for me is that when you build a brand, it's not the same. It's not at all the same. And what Jeff was talking about in enduring, I think building a brand, if you can survive as a brand and be around for 5, 10, 20 years, over time, organically, it'll just continue to grow. But you have to survive, and you need to make sure you keep your customers and keep the quality of your product. So a lot of that I've learned a lot from that. In terms of the vision itself, I think pour over was the product from the beginning. Pour over is still the product today. And as far as the category of single serve pour over goes, like, we want to be the ones on shelf. We want to be the ones that people buy online, whether it's on Amazon or our website. And absolutely 1,000%, if you're going camping and you're drinking coffee, you should definitely be drinking Kuju coffee. So I think that's been pretty consistent. There's nuances to it that maybe Jeff can share more about.
Yeah, our vision right now is the world more outside with Kuju by its side. And obviously that's a little bit of a high level vision, but to answer the question, the vision evolves just as much as anything else in the business evolves, by virtue of the fact that the marketplace evolves. And so the question is not so much does the vision need to change, but do you have a core ethos or sense of why you're going to do all the work to build your business? And do you have kind of a core mission behind everything that you're doing? Because, for example, our vision pre-COVID was actually Kuju in the pocket of every traveler in the world. And then COVID happened, and that would fall on deaf ears because there's not a lot of travelers now. So we tweaked it, and outside recreation and lifestyle is much more of a thing now than it was before, and increasingly so. So the vision is different. It doesn't touch on a lot of operational pieces on a weekly basis, but it helps keep our North Star. And I think to touch on what Justin said, the vision and understanding how you approach it is not so. I think it's important to understand your industry and understand conventional growth curves, understand your personal philosophy on equity and dilution. I would probably, Justin was probably using I know Justin was using a figure of speech, venture capital, like cash making machine. I would argue that it's cash losing machine. That's by virtue, like 9 out of 10 startups have to lose in order for one to make it. And so you can do that on a CPG company, but you don't have to. Whereas maybe in tech, maybe you have to fuel with money more quickly in the beginning. But the point is just awareness of like your business model, your marketplace, your growth trajectories, your margins, and what you want out of it. And I think that's the hardest thing that changes, because you don't stay the same age and you don't stay in the same life stage as your company ages. When we started, I just had a newborn, and now I have 2 kids. So my life stage requirements are different from what they were before. It doesn't change the business that much, but it changes how you navigate collaboration and innovation and time and workflow and everything. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. One other question we have from our viewers is kind of what's the most difficult thing that you guys have had to work on that has had a direct impact for your customer? I know you referenced Jeff, COVID as well, but if there are other kind of pivots or changes that you had to make that affected downstream?
Most difficult thing, that's a big one.
I have a, this might be different from Jeff's, but from my point of view, the most difficult thing that had a downstream impact on our customers is how we make our product. Production, quality, how do we decide how to roast, changing roasts. There's a whole history to this. We used to buy these filters and actually fill it with a spoon. I took a PVC pipe, I cut it in half, I measured to exactly how much it should fill, and I sat at this table in this living room actually filling it for the first Kickstarter. And then we got someone else to do it, and then we got a portioning machine, which is like this big. And then we got that Subaru deal, and what that ended up being, we got an office space that was kind of like one of those industrial park offices. We bought machinery, imported it, and it was a packing machine. And I was like, I've never used a packing machine. And it was a cheap one too. So it always broke. For 2 years, we did that. I sat in front of this machine, pulling product off the line and hoping that it was good enough for the customer. And then we finally decided to move to a co-packer. I think that decision has been probably, from my point of view, the single most enabling decision for the company to actually deliver on the things that we want to do, because it means that we're able to have product that's good quality. We're able to rely on our partners. We don't have to worry about worry about a bolt breaking on a machine. We could focus on building the brand. So it took us like about 3-4 years to get to that point to justify the volume. But it was a big deal because we got into a store called the Academy on a fill-in order. It took us 2 weeks to fulfill it, and that was the only thing that we could do. Now with our co-packing capabilities, we could just put a PO in and then it'll be taken care of pretty much. So that's probably one of the biggest things from my point of view. How about you, Jeff?
Yeah, I would leave it there. It was a horrible experience. I think Justin's talking about quality and taste. I think maintaining quality of product, consistency of taste. We are the highest rated pour over, I believe. and people order us over and over because of the taste. So yeah, those are terrible days. I don't like to think about those. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love the story. I actually remember, Justin, that when you won that bid, I guess with Subaru, or you got that contract, I felt like it was a pretty momentous day for your company. Would you consider that like a breakout moment for you guys? Was that the unlock?
I think so. Because that entire order funded our capital investment into our first production line, really. I don't know if we didn't have that, it would have been, I don't know what would have happened. We would have waited a little bit longer before we invested into that.
I would probably say it was a breakout moment in the sense that it was about a $250,000 order when we had less than 100K in business at the time. It was enabling internally, but I would say the breakout moment was really when we landed in REI, because that was really touching on a specific customer segment, on a shelf set that was needing innovation. So we were able to kind of position ourselves as kind of pioneering, which is what we were doing. We were the first ones to do pour over, which is why we have a production line that is different from maybe other people out there. But I think the dual answer kind of touches on, as a CPG company, we were at a trade show and we met the former president of Kind Snacks, and we said, hey, do you have any tips? And I thought he was going to ask about marketing or funding or any of that. And his first question was actually, how much can you make? And that's very important, because you can only sell as much as you can make. So if anyone out there is doing physical products, it's really not to be underestimated, the amount of time that needs to go into production. Yeah, and everything that goes around that.
That's awesome. Taking another question from our viewers. Now, your guys' work looks awesome on Instagram. That video looked awesome as well. Do you have a marketing agency or a separate firm that you use, or?
I'll take that one, Justin. I want to say first off, the video was directed by a great, a great friend, a very talented filmmaker of mine. His name's Arthur Toe. If you're listening to this, maybe you know him. I'm very fortunate to have known him since junior high. So that was really his work there. So we're very fortunate to know him, and that was a lot of fun. We did work on that video for I think over 8 months, obviously on and off, but we've gone through various contractors to do marketing, different types of agencies, but a lot of it tends to be implementation oriented. I think the feeling that you get when you look at our channels or our packaging is driven by kind of our own ethos and our own brand architecture and understanding. Maybe if we were engineers and we didn't have as much expertise there, we'd be more focused on outsourcing that. But over the course of marketing and selling a commodity like coffee, obviously differentiating on taste and a bunch of other things, it's really important to us that our vision is to create more than just a coffee brand. As I said, the world more outside with Kuju by outside. We want to inspire people to get outside. Our mission is to cultivate rejuvenation. So we want to create moments of rest and rejuvenation for people, inspire those, enable them, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of that is driven by our own thought processes and evolution of understanding what does it look like to turn this feeling that we want to give people when they see or use our product and translate that to every channel. So it takes time. It definitely takes time and iteration.
That's awesome. And then one question we have too is obviously going into REI and then setting out into other stores. Tell me about that journey. How did you make that? I don't know if it's considered a jump, but REI to other food stores,
You want to do it, Justin? Or you want
Jeff does a lot of the wholesale key account stuff, so that's your question.
Well, that's a two-part question. It's how do you make a jump, and then I think the second question is how do you get into these stores. So one, there's a lot of networking that happens. It's just like anything else. That's the first thing to dispel. It's not like there's a secret set of people who make decisions for key chains. We are in a lot of different chains. We'll be going national in Costco's World Market. We're in Whole Foods. We're in Bass Pro Shops, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have experience getting into the bigger chains. We're not necessarily going for places like Walmart and Target. But the first answer, I'd say it's just people. You got to network and ask and ask and ask and send samples and send samples. The second thing is it's important to recognize that any retailer out there is a customer because they're buying product, and therefore they have problems. The problem that REI had was Starbucks instant coffee was not necessarily innovative or up to par with their merchandise standards. So we provided a solution that was higher quality, and we designed a packaging, a product with packaging that fit their brand kind of look. And so it's much harder to build a product and say, hey, I want to get into that store, and then expect that it gets into the store, versus say, I'm passionate about category X, and I really want to build something to get into chain A. And if chain A is your desired customer, you want to design your product, the value propositions, features, and everything in accordance with what you think their problem sets are. And so when we wanted to try to see if we can get to cost plus world market, we looked at different SKU selections and formats and packaging and design philosophies that fit that vertical. And we designed a whole collection from it, and we were able to get in. But then you have to line it up with, at a later stage, getting the right salespeople or team who understand that industry, understanding what kind of margins they expect. And what will happen is, as you put products together, the buyers at these big chains see thousands of products on a monthly basis. And so they're able to sniff out which products are done and built in a way that all the value signals across margin, shelf space, dimensions, product value, pricing, look like they were built by a team or individual that understand how to fit into their ecosystem. So we got into REI, I think, because we did that. The way you make a jump from an REI to a Sprouts and maybe to a cost plus world market is it's very difficult. Not because you can't get in front of the buyer. It's difficult because every channel and vertical has different expectations on quality, on margin, on delivery. So for example, we ship direct to REI, so our margin's higher. But if you're trying to get into grocery stores, anyone in the grocery space knows that you have to go through distributors, KeHE and Unify. And that takes some margin hits. They understand that the grocery sector requires promotions, which also cuts out your margin. So I think the mastery of moving from a vertical to another is respecting the fact that they are different animals, and success in one channel and the behaviors that are attributed to success in that channel do not necessarily work for a different channel, because they're different industries for a reason. So we were very attentive to that. It was painful when we were going from outdoor to grocery, but now we've built a certain amount of expertise and understand how to handle multiple channels. And we're generally prepared, I think, for the most part. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, it's awesome. Awesome. Well, we got to the point where I think it's time we get a little demo, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, so Kuju Coffee. This is our single serve pour over. It comes in it's the pour over, so it's teared open, and it's this filter with coffee inside. We have a couple of formats, 6-pack boxes. This is what we've got at like Whole Foods and Sprouts. So sometimes we think about this like our grocery SKU. And we also have like these 5-pack bags, which we call them travel 5-packs. So it's 5 of the filters. These are also really good if you want to make cold brew. Put coffee in, water inside, let it sit overnight, and you have cold brew. But the gist of how this works, I'll show you guys, is there's a perforation on top, and you just tear it open. Open it up, sits on top of your mug. So these anchors are like that. You might have seen these before. Maybe you've seen one of our videos, and these anchors actually fold back, and that makes it a little bit more stable. So this is really good because you don't need another coffee brewing device. You don't need a grinder. All you need is the product, hot water, and a mug. So I've done this at the airport. I think Jeff's done this on an airplane before. The best one by far for me is backpacking. It's when I when I do it backpacking, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so luxurious. And then you just take hot water and you pour. It takes about 1 to 2 minutes, super quick, and you got your coffee. So you can kind of see it coming to the top. One of the things is you want to pour consistently. It makes it a lot easier with a gooseneck kettle, but our customers use pots. Our customers use measuring cups. Some people use K-cup machines. So wherever you can get your hot water from. And that's about it. You can let it sit in there, you take it out, and then you have your coffee. So this is actually how I make my coffee every day. It's not because it's my product. Well, I mean, yes, I definitely have a lot of the product here. So, but it's actually the fastest. It takes about a minute. So versus me getting out my Hario filter, grinding coffee, or making an espresso, which is how I originally got into coffee. This is how I do it in the mornings. And then in the afternoons, I have an espresso, usually with Kuju beans.
That's awesome.
So
Thank you.
That's the product. It's all ethically sourced, specialty grade coffee. I think that's a big thing. It's all of our coffee. We didn't really talk too much about this, but the coffee we use, we have a incredible attention to making sure that it is the best coffee we can find at the highest quality. And it shows in the product, it shows in the reviews, because we have competitors and they're it's a similar filter, I'm not gonna lie, but the reviews are for ours is higher. So it's ethically sourced. We have a fair trade organic line, which is the white packaging, it's single origin. And yeah, that's the coffee.
A couple other things. It is 100% recyclable. We donate 1% of sales to the National Park Foundation, and we do use 100% wind power in our production and packaging processes. So we tend to be known, and truthfully, so a sustainable, impact-driven brand. We don't talk about it that much, but people always told us like, oh, it's so great to drink good coffee when you're outdoors and support an impact-driven brand. And when we started getting that feedback, we realized, oh, it's just kind of the way we think about the best way to build a brand anyway. So that's kind of an innate part of what we've created, I guess. Yeah.
That's awesome. And Justin, Jeff, where can our viewers purchase these things?
Oh, you can get them a lot of places, but I would say frankly, a lot of people buy Amazon, and then our key retailers, we're at REI, we're national in REI. We're national in Sprouts, Bass Pro Shops, Cabela's. We're in a number of independent grocery stores, gift shops, Academy Sports. If you're in the South, if you don't know them, there are about 250 locations in the South. Yeah.
If you're a hunter, there's a store called Sportsman's Warehouse, which was actually our very, very first retailer. They have about 100 stores in the Western U.S.
Yeah. But we always, if you guys want to support some Asian brethren, it's always KujuCoffee.com. The direct
KujuCoffee.com. AHN just launched their marketplace, and you could get it there, which actually directs you to KujuCoffee.com. But if you go through there, you can get a coupon code for 15% off.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Justin, for that. Yeah, definitely check out the AHN marketplace. We just launched it yesterday, so stay tuned for that. We've got another question. I think based on Justin, you mentioned kind of your first store that you opened with. How did you guys know this would be a hit with campers, with backpackers and hikers and whatnot?
I don't know.
Well, when we first started, the short answer was probably we didn't necessarily know, but when it was validated, it was either our Kickstarter campaign, which we successfully funded, so there's validation there. But one of the big things might be when we went to an outdoor trade show. We went to this trade show, outdoorsy companies like the North Face, Cliff Bar, and whatnot, and the tagline we used was like, tired of instant coffee, so are we. And the level that resonated with people at the show, and they all say, yeah, instant coffee sucks, this is so good, this is so much better, is when we kind of knew that this would definitely be a good product for the outdoors. And as a consumer myself, and we're both Eagle Scouts, so we spend a lot of time in the outdoors as well. We kind of knew the customer segment. We knew the problems and we knew the challenges. Like we knew it would be a little bit of a barrier that you would have to make this and pack it out, because instant coffee you don't. But the bet was that, well, when you have the coffee, it's totally worth it. It's just to be able to take this. So in short, listening to the market and making sure you're actually taking what people say and like processing and synthesizing it into a way that can drive like what you do next.
Yeah, I would also add, in the spirit of being as helpful to the community, I just say I never had a doubt it was not going to work. And if it wasn't going to work, I was determined that we would adapt until it worked, which is really what it kind of is, right? Like every company has to adapt over and over and over. But I just decided that this was going to work. And you just work hard. That was it. That's it. I don't know if there's a lot of room for hesitation. If you're going to get into something, you can do it iteratively. Iteratively would be, definitely, I think it's a good thing to keep your paying job until you find some real traction. But even once you get traction and you're successful in the beginning, I think the level of determination required to come out on top, if you're successful, is still critical, because you're going to have competition. You're going to have maybe overcapitalized competitors. You're going to have life things come up that are going to get in your way. So I don't even know if it's so much about how did you know if it was going to work. It was more, what was the driving force that enabled you to be so convicted to decide in the beginning that this was going to work? Because if you're going to say, I'll try it, there's someone out there who's going to be determined to just squash you. And I have no hesitation that we will continue to be successful, not because of ego, but a belief in our willingness to continue to adapt and just connect that to a level of grind and determination, I think. So definitely true with what Justin said. But I think what precedes that tends to be your level of choice of determination that you want to bring to those questions that Justin kind of brought up. Because you didn't share, Justin, that at that trade show, it was a horrible experience building the booth. That was like one of the worst days ever. We skipped lunch and we were like, we should not have skipped lunch. We drove 11 hours to go there. We drove 11 hours back. There was all that stuff. So yeah, we adapted, but there was just a lot of sweat equity that went into that enabled us to be in a position to receive those insights and have those experiences.
That's awesome. I just want to announce for our viewers that we have a winner for the Pack and Pantry Duo. Thank you, Jeff and Justin, for giving this giveaway out to our viewers. So the winner is Izzy Besser. Awesome.
Right.
Yay, Izzy.
That's Izzy.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm curious, guys, another question from our viewers is kind of what's the next stage of personal mindset growth for both of you? Like, how will you continue to develop yourself? Both you and Jeff and Justin have these, obviously, the mindset of being winners in this market. How do you continue to uphold that and nourish it as well?
You go first. That's a good question.
Yeah, I have two answers to that. The first short answer, and this is not any particular order, is Jeff and I actually read some sort of book together. We go through it and we read a chapter every week. So we're always learning. And the subject matter is different depending on the book. But I think what's important for that is that we're not in our heads all the time and kind of trying to invent the world in our heads, and we're taking outside perspectives. But more importantly, we're taking outside perspectives and we're on the same page. no pun intended. So that helps a lot with our development and learning, because then we can use that as a platform to discuss and how we should continue to move forward. For me personally, in terms of growth mindset, I feel like it's actually gotten to the point where the growth mindset is not about me. The growth mindset is about the company. So everything we think about is like, how do we grow the company? How do we grow our online sales? How do we get out of COVID and alive and thrive? And in doing so, I guess things like this happen. Like we're on this AMA, and we're humbled to be on here, but there was never this intent like, oh, I want to get my personal brand out there and talk about Kuju. It was more like, Kuju, we want Kuju to grow, so we're just going to do whatever the heck it takes to grow it. And then when you do that for a while, you can just look back and you can reflect on what you've learned and realize like, oh my gosh, I learned so much. And so that's kind of where I am right now. It's always trying to push on that front. And the thing that you push on is always different. It used to be supply chain and operations. It continues to be like driving e-com sales for me. It's a lot of the stuff I work on. And more, it's becoming more about leading, building teams, and positioning yourself in the marketplace. So it continues to change, but it's through growth through the brand itself.
Yeah, I also just read a lot. I read a lot, or I try to read a lot. I know a lot of the successful entrepreneurs who also read a lot, because if you're really pioneering, you shouldn't be able to find someone who's done what you've done. You should be able to find people who have dealt with similar problems, but not necessarily your context. So it's important to continue to educate yourself and take your ego out of it. That's the hardest one. But it's not about you, as Justin said. It's about your team, your customers, your vision, and supporting each other as you go through difficult pathways. So that's, I think it's tough, but I think it's one of the most important things to keep improving yourself.
That's awesome. I guess personally, what's the most recent book that you guys are currently reading or have read?
It's called Rocket Fuel, and it's about kind of how entrepreneurial duos like Walt and Roy Disney, or usually there's kind of like the big visionary and then the person who's kind of on the inside, how to measure or how to make sure that collaboration continues to turn into value as opposed to just conflict. Because typically, tension is what creates value. Like an ops team working with the sales team, they have different metrics, but they need each other. And so I think for Justin and I to continue to be complementary, it's important that we continue to clarify what it looks like for us to grow. Not even now, but maybe 3 to 5 years from now. Yeah. Reading a couple other books, but that's the main one that we're reading.
That's awesome. And I think kind of on this like brotherly book club, and as well as obviously running your business together, what's it like obviously working with family? What's it like when you guys have your annual plan, and where does that take place as well?
Justin, want to do that, or want me to take that one?
I'm sure we both have answers, but I can start. I'm sure we both have different kinds of answers, but I can start it. It comes with its challenges, and it's pros and cons for sure. I think one of the biggest pros is that there's just trust. Family is family, and one of the things Jeff and I always say is we're always brothers first before co-founders. Is that no matter, because that's always going to be the case. Like no matter what, you literally can't change that. So, and I think there's a little bit of an understanding of like where the other person's coming from, which would because you've grown up together, you understand like why they think this a certain way. There are definitely challenges just by virtue of being brothers, because there's still a brother dynamic. So that inevitably seeps in to any kind of relationship, whether it's professional or familial. But overall, it's been pretty good. And I think the most important thing is that you are clear with what the challenges are and that you actively work on them. And I think a lot of the reading the books together has been super helpful because it gives us common language.
I'm not gonna add anything to that. That covers it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. One other question, well, hopefully more. Another question from our viewers is, did you ever sell your product at food markets, or did you go straight to kind of retail? I know some of our viewers now.
Like food markets, like probably like farmers markets and stuff.
Yeah, like farmers markets. Or it sounded like you guys had as well as kind of a Kickstarter. Yeah.
We did Kickstarter. We never did food markets. I think it was more the strategic intent to go to the outdoor channel. So we did a lot of outdoor channel marketing things. On that, I think it depends on your product, your category. I think it depends on the nature of how consumers like to discover that type of product. So if it's like honey, probably makes sense. If it's coffee, it probably makes sense, but we were never doing the kind of general food service in that sense. I'd say, you know, if it's like bottled juice, that probably makes sense. So I think it also depends on strategy, your customer segment that you're targeting, et cetera, et cetera. So, but the answer for us is we didn't do farmers markets or anything in the beginning.
I don't actually think we've ever done that.
No. No, we haven't.
Yeah, I want to also add, I think part of the reason why we didn't do that is because the initial product, the customers, the people who go in the outdoors and camping. So that's why we went to REI. That's why we went to Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop. Even, I mean, in a lot of ways, that's why we go to Whole Foods and Sprouts, because when you go camping, you buy food. Where do you go? You go to the grocery store. But in terms of the farmers markets, you don't necessarily go to the farmers market to buy food for camping. So I think that's, you know, when I think about, I've thought about it before. I've thought about, should we just try to go to the Ferry Building Farmers Market and try to sell our product? And the assumption I had was that it'd be really hard because it's not the target market that we're going for right now.
Got it.
Brand association. We don't want to be known as like, hey, how'd you guys start? We started at farmers markets, which is, started at REI.
That's awesome. Another question is kind of, what is your response to people who may say that the coffee industry is oversaturated?
I think it's definitely oversaturated, and I would say they're probably right. but that said, I think there's it's not oversaturated with innovation. I think it's saturated with a lot of players, and I think where we are trying to make a contribution is just level up the innovation and the use occasions that a fabulous tasting coffee experience can be accessible in. And you know, you'll see a lot of coffee companies, you know, essentially kind of doing similar things, and you know, big players aside, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think there's a respect that I think we have for the size of the industry, and therefore a respect that transfers to the consumers, and respecting that they have choices. So if we're going to win, in whatever fashion it means for us to win, we need to deliver utmost quality and satisfaction. And that has to always be earned. But I'm not sure we're as concerned with market saturation as much as we are with just our customers, and listening to them and providing innovation to the consumers and the retailers that we currently work with. If you're starting a company, competition is part of the landscape, but it should never drive your strategy, in my opinion. I think Justin shares that thought too. It can inform things in the early days, but you know, otherwise, don't do something that somebody else is doing or base it off of that. Do it based on what you creatively have passion for, and if there's a problem that you think you can solve for people, then just do it really well.
That's awesome. I think on that same vein, you mentioned a bit on kind of how you can innovate in this space. How do you guys decide on different product SKUs or kind of coffee roasts? What's that thought process like?
You want to do some Jared Simmons here, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing is starts with the customer. For us, we have a customer base now, so it's a lot easier than it was in the beginning. So now we ask our customers, what do they want? And we listen to them. People write in and say, hey, we want X, Y, and Z. People always wrote in and said, we love your coffee, love your base camp blend. Can I buy it in whole bean? And it took a while for us to decide that that's okay. So we have whole beans now. It's part of the pack and pantry duo that I think Izzy is going to get. But after that, there's also your secondary customer, or some might say the primary customer that Jeff was talking about, which is our wholesale partners. Like, what do they want? Like, what's going to solve their problems? And then the counterpoint to that is, how do you want to run your operation? How do you want to what do you want your SKU assortment to look like? It's called, I think, SKU rationalization, making sure that every SKU is delivering upon what it's supposed to be delivering. Because usually the 80-20 rule, it's amazing. It actually works. 80% of our revenue comes from 20% of our SKUs, and the rest are kind of support, but they do have their role. Just because it doesn't necessarily bring us, our Angels Landing doesn't bring as much top line sales as our base camp blend, it rounds out the collection and it makes the whole thing look more attractive. So, I think it start with the customer, whoever your customer is, and then it's counterbalancing that with, how do you want your SKU assortment to actually look like from a P&L, operations, and also a brand point of view.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We've got one other question coming in about kind of, say, without the Subaru deal, how do you guys think you would have scaled for Kuju to become what it is today?
That's a good question. I don't think the Subaru deal is what enabled us to scale. That was just a large PO that we were able to finance with the PO itself and just fulfill the order. What enabled us to scale, I think, is just making strategic investments on an operational basis so that we could actually fulfill on the big gains that we wanted to have. And then I think ultimately a product that was well positioned for its target audience, the outdoor enthusiast who loves coffee, and lining up kind of channel strategy, margin, go-to market, and everything for that. So I don't know if you ever get one big thing that scales, because scale by virtue is kind of implied to be across a certain amount of time. Even if you were to go national in Trader Joe's, that is probably, at least a 6-month process, at least. So if you were to say we got into Trader Joe's and we scaled, you're talking about 6 to 12 months worth of work. And so I think it's important to understand that I think the core piece to anything scaling is just getting the unit economics right, or getting the smallest version of it correct. And if you can figure that out, it should be, relative to figuring that out, much easier to just make that happen multiple times. And I would probably say to anyone in CPG, you'll see if you speak to investor communities, a lot of times maybe that smallest one is a unit economic case study for like, hey, this customer liked it and I get this margin. But at a higher level, it's really once you hit $1 million in revenue is when you can probably presume that you've kind of gotten your venture into the game. That's when investors will look at you more seriously. That's when you'll start to see more natural market pull for your products and a kind of a critical mass on a customer base level, so that you can maybe leverage customer insights as opposed to just saying, hey, should we try this? Should we try this? Should we try this? We did a survey. We had 50 people fill it out, which is not bad, but there are certain numbers that you want to hit to be relevant to future scaling also.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I think that'll be our last question there. Well, thank you both so much for joining us on our Asian Hustle Network AMA. So thank you, Justin. Thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure, and thank you everyone who tuned in. Awesome.
Thanks for having us, KK.
Yeah, no worries. All right. See you guys. Thank you.
All right. See you guys.